Let's bow and breathe. Oh God, we ask very simply this morning the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts may be acceptable in your sight. Amen. In the season of Lent, we remember how Jesus went into the wilderness to prepare for his ministry. And presumably, during Lent, we remember that this was the most important thing he could be doing at that time. Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit, returned from the Jordan and was led by the Spirit into the wilderness, where for 40 days he was tempted by the devil. He ate nothing at all during those days. And when they were over, he was famished. The devil said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command this stone to become a loaf of bread." Now, what we may assume was an immersion in the presence of God was interrupted by hunger. Whatever else happened to Jesus in the wilderness, hunger drew his attention from it. Now, hunger was not only distracting, it was tempting. Hunger, more than anything else in Jesus' life and ministry, caused him to think of his own needs exclusively. Now, if the temptation was real, it would have taken real effort to turn his thinking and his faith back to his mission and his mandate. So Jesus says, "It is written, one does not live by bread alone." Other temptations are recorded. The temptation to power and glory, however, was secondary to this temptation caused by hunger. The easy path to recognition was even farther still from that temptation that arose from hunger. The call of the ego, the call of the easy way, calls that we ourselves frequently hear, were eclipsed by that first temptation that was birthed in hunger. When the devil had finished every test, he departed from him until a more opportune time. Now, that more opportune time would come later in the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus prepared for death. Even here, however, Jesus was able to think of others more highly than himself, and he prayed for his disciples. It was hunger in the wilderness that almost paralyzed Jesus and would have made everything else impossible. If we are hungry, it is difficult to think of others. If we are hungry, it is difficult for us to think of our work and our mission, even for Jesus. How important, then, is it for farmers to fulfill their calling so that everyone else might have the strength and focus to fulfill theirs? If we do not bless, thank, and care for our farm folk, no one will have the strength to care for us. I remember when I was a military chaplain and go out in public in my uniform. It was common for me to be thanked for the service that people imagined I gave. In Toronto, when in uniform, the attendant at the subway would not permit me to put a token in the turnstile, and I rode for free. They did this as a thank you for your service. Now, it was humbling because I was receiving a reward for someone else's sacrifice. And I would think not only of frontline soldiers, sailors, and air personnel, but of farmers whose work was long and dangerous, whose work required long hours in all weather and constant sacrifice. A farmer's work is fundamental in providing our first and greatest human need, and makes all those secondary gifts, such as industry, art, values, possible. I received thanksgiving because I was part of something that protected gifts that would not exist if it were not for farmers. And I often thought, if I were as good and as important and as praiseworthy as people thought, I would be a farmer. Today is the third Sunday in Lent. In the Gospel, Jesus is leaving the wilderness. Were it not for farmers, there would be no place else to go. Were it not for farmers, the wilderness and the deprivation and the hunger it implies would be all we know. The later temptations would hold no sway. There would be no power to seize, no temple upon which to stand. For the soldier, sailor, or aviator, there would be no nation to protect. The wilderness for us in the season of Lent can be a place of contemplation. The wilderness for us in the season of Lent can be a place of restoration and refreshment because a farmer has made some other wilderness a place of bounty. So it is this morning. We gather to join with and bless the most important members of our community, farmers and farm families. Amen.